Growing up in a small suburb outside of Detroit, I was always the odd one out in the Mitchell family. While my parents and three siblings worked steady jobs at Meridian Industries, the manufacturing giant that employed half our town, I dreamed of running the place. They called me delusional, said I'd never amount to anything beyond the assembly line if I was lucky enough to get hired at all. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. 15 years later, I walked into Meridian's executive boardroom, not as an employee, but as its new owner. The same company that had rejected my job application 4 separate times, the place that had denied every member of my family any chance at advancement beyond their stations. The same company I had just purchased for $47 million. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just proving people wrong. It's buying the very system they told you you'd never be part of. The earliest memory I have of Meridian Industries is the smell. That distinct combination of machine oil, hot metal, and industrial cleaner that clung to my father's clothes when he'd come home from his shift. By age 5, I could identify that smell anywhere. It was the scent of stability in our household, but also the scent of quiet resignation. My name is Tessa Mitchell. I grew up in Lakefield, Michigan, a town where your last name and your relationship to Meridian Industries determined pretty much everything about your future. The Mitchells had worked at Meridian for 3 generations. My grandfather started on the factory floor in 1963. My father followed in 1988. My older brother Jake in 2005, and my sister Melissa and brother Connor both joined in the early 2010s. Our family gatherings inevitably turned into impromptu Meridian staff meetings, complaints about shift supervisors, gossip about who was getting promoted, and endless debates about the company's decisions. Through it all, I'd listen, absorbing every detail about how the company operated, its strengths, its weaknesses. Not because I wanted to join the family tradition, but because even then, something in me knew there had to be more than just accepting your predetermined place in the system. Meridian's the best you can hope for in this town, my father would say whenever I'd talk about my dreams of going to business school. Steady work, decent benefits, no need to chase fantasies when security is right here. I was 12 when I first announced at Sunday dinner that someday I was going to run Meridian. The laughter still echoes in my mind sometimes. "Tessa, honey," my mother said, trying to soften the blow while my brothers snickered. "People like us don't run companies like that. We're lucky to work there. Best set your sights on something more realistic." My father was less delicate. "Mitchell women work in packaging or HR if they're lucky. Mitchell men work the floor or maintenance. That's just how it is. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be." But the thing about being told what you can't do is that sometimes, for certain people, it becomes the very fuel they need. Each dismissal, each patronizing smile when I talked about my ambitions, they didn't discourage me. They crystallized my resolve. High school was where the divide between my family's expectations and my ambitions really began to show. While my siblings had all dropped advanced classes to work part-time at Meridian's summer youth program, I fought to take every business and economics class available. I started a small e-commerce business selling custom-designed phone cases out of our garage, reinvesting every penny of profit. My senior year, when college applications went out, my parents didn't even blink when my brothers didn't apply. "Waste of money," my father called it. But when I got accepted to Michigan State's business program with a partial scholarship, the argument started. "We can't afford this," my mother insisted. "You'll drop out when reality hits, and then what?" my father added. "Just take the entry-level job they offered you in the call center," my sister Melissa suggested. "It's a foot in the door." That was the first time Meridian officially became part of my story. They had a program recruiting high school graduates for their customer service department. My entire family pushed me to apply. It was considered a coveted position compared to the factory floor. I did apply, mostly to stop the arguments at home. The rejection letter came 3 weeks later. Insufficient experience and qualifications, it stated. This for an entry-level position that literally required no experience. Later, I would learn from my brother that the hiring manager had told him, "Your sister seems like she thinks she's too good for this place. We don't need that attitude." The night I received that rejection letter, I sat on my bed and made a promise to myself. Someday, I would make Meridian regret that decision. I worked 3 jobs to put myself through college. Morning shifts at a coffee shop, evening shifts at a retail store, and weekend gigs doing bookkeeping for local small businesses. My family's support consisted mainly of reminding me that there would always be a spot on the assembly line when this college phase was over. The summer after my sophomore year, with some decent business courses under my belt and an impressive GPA, I applied for Meridian's corporate internship program. My family was cautiously supportive. Finally, I was showing some sense by trying to get in with the company, even if it was through an unusual route. Second rejection. While your academic achievements are notable, we are looking for candidates with more relevant industry experience. It was a form letter, but my brother Connor let slip that he'd overheard the HR manager. "Another Mitchell? But this one wants to start in the office instead of earning her place like everyone else?" Not happening. Instead of Meridian, I landed an internship with a startup in Detroit that made supply chain management software. The experience was transformative. For the first time, I was around people who didn't think my ambitions were unreasonable, who actually valued my ideas. I learned more about business operations in those 3 months than in 2 years of classes. When I returned for my junior year, I switched my concentration to supply chain management and entrepreneurship. My advisors noticed my drive and connected me with alumni mentors. One of them, Vanessa Kelly, took a particular interest in my story. "So your whole family works for this manufacturing company, but they won't give you a chance?" she asked during one of our coffee meetings. "They see me as trouble," I explained. "Someone who won't stay in her lane." Vanessa smiled. Some of the most successful people I know made their careers by refusing to stay in the lanes others assigned them. She became my first real mentor, showing me how to build a network, how to identify opportunities others missed, how to position myself not as a job seeker, but as a problem solver. Most importantly, she helped me see beyond just getting a job. At Meridian, "If that company can't recognize your value," she told me, "then they don't deserve you. Build something better." I graduated summa cum laude with job offers from 3 different companies in Chicago and New York. My family's reaction was mixed. Pride tinged with confusion about why I would leave Michigan for uncertain prospects, when Meridian was right. Here. "At least try one more time," my mother urged. "Apply for their management training program. Now that you have a degree, they'll have to take you seriously." Against my better judgment, I did. Third rejection. "While your qualifications are impressive, we are currently focused on candidates with direct industry experience." The real reason, which I learned through my sister's friend who worked in HR, was that my application had been flagged. The Mitchell, "girl with the attitude problem," they called me. Apparently, word had gotten around about my stated ambitions to run the place someday, and the old guard management saw me as a potential troublemaker. That third rejection should have been devastating. Instead, it was liberating. I packed my bags and moved to Chicago to take a position as a supply chain analyst with a technology company that specialized in logistics optimization. "You're making a mistake," my father warned as I loaded my car. "There's no stability out there like what Meridian offers." "Maybe I don't want stability," I replied. "Maybe I want something more." He shook his head. "People like us don't get more, Tessa. The sooner you accept that, the happier you'll be." Those words followed me to Chicago, echoing in my mind during late nights at the office when doubt would creep in. But Chicago opened a world of possibilities I'd never imagined in Lakefield. I excelled at my job, quickly earning promotions and building a reputation as someone who could identify inefficiencies and implement creative solutions. 3 years into my career, I was headhunted by a venture capital firm specializing in industrial technology. They were looking for someone who understood both the technical and human aspects of manufacturing, someone who could spot outdated systems and envision their modernization. At Blackridge Partners, I found my true calling. I wasn't just analyzing supply chains anymore. I was helping identify companies with untapped potential, companies hamstrung by outdated practices or leadership. We would invest, restructure, and either help them thrive independently or prepare them for profitable acquisition. During my second year at Blackridge, I received a text from my brother Jake. "Meridian's in trouble, layoffs coming, Dad's worried." I hadn't been home much, holidays only, and even those visits were strained. My family couldn't relate to my life in Chicago, and I had little patience for their continued insistence that I should come to my senses and return to Lakefield. But this news about Meridian caught my attention. I began researching, pulling reports, and analyzing their market position. What I found didn't surprise me. Meridian had failed to innovate. While competitors had modernized their operations and diversified their product lines, Meridian stuck stubbornly to the same processes and products they'd been making for decades. Their client base was shrinking, their equipment was becoming obsolete, and their management seemed incapable of adapting. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now, back to where we left off. I compiled my findings into a comprehensive analysis and sent it to Blackridge's senior partners with a note. "This company is failing but doesn't need to. With the right leadership and modernization strategy, it could thrive again." Lauren Barnes, one of the founding partners, called me into her office the next day. "This Meridian company," she said, tapping my report. "You've put a lot of work into this analysis. Any particular reason?" I hesitated before answering. "My family has worked there for generations. The town depends on it. If it fails, it's not just my family that suffers. It's the entire community." Lauren studied me for a moment. "And you think it can be saved?" "I know it can," I said with more confidence than I perhaps should have felt. "Their core business is still sound. They just need a complete operational overhaul and new market strategy." "And who would lead this overhaul? You?" The question caught me off guard. I had been thinking about saving my family's jobs, about proving that my business education had real-world value. I hadn't explicitly considered putting myself at the helm, but once the idea was voiced, it seemed obvious. "Yes," I answered. "I would?" Lauren smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Let's put together a proposal." The next month was a whirlwind of research, planning, and preparations. Blackridge was intrigued by the potential return on investment, but they weren't willing to put up the full capital needed. I would need to find additional investors and put skin in the game myself. I emptied my savings. I leveraged every connection I'd made in the past 5 years. I pitched to angel investors and smaller firms, emphasizing both the business opportunity and the community impact. Gradually, the funding came together, not just from profit-motivated investors, but from impact investment funds interested in revitalizing American manufacturing. 6 months after that initial conversation with Lauren, I found myself on a private flight to Michigan with an acquisition offer in my briefcase, $47 million for controlling interest in Meridian Industries. The board meeting was scheduled for 9 a.m. on a Tuesday. I arrived at 8:30, dressed in a navy blue suit that cost more than my father made in a month. The receptionist, the same woman who had handed me my first rejection letter 6 years earlier, didn't recognize me. "I'm here for the board meeting," I said, presenting my business card. Tessa Mitchell, representing Blackridge Partners. Her eyes widened slightly at the name, but she maintained her professional composure. Of course, Ms. Mitchell. They're expecting you in the main conference room. As I walked through the halls of Meridian for the first time, I noticed how little had changed from the company my family had described around our dinner table for years. The same faded motivational posters, the same outdated equipment is visible. Through the windows overlooking the factory floor, the same tired resignation on employees' faces. The boardroom held 8 men, all in their 50s or older, looking grim. Richard Gaines, Meridian's CEO and the man whose signature had been on all 3 of my rejection letters, sat at the head of the table. "Ms. Mitchell," he said, standing to shake my hand without warmth, "we understand you have a proposal for us." I could tell from his tone that he had no idea who I really was, just another face from some investment firm coming to pick over Meridian's bones. "Yes, Mr. Gaines. Blackridge Partners, together with our investment consortium, would like to acquire a controlling interest in Meridian Industries." I laid out the proposal, the purchase price, the commitment to keep the factory in Lakefield, the modernization plans that would secure the company's future. As I spoke, I could see their expressions changing from dismissal to interest to hope. When I finished, there was silence until Gaines finally spoke. "This is more favorable than we expected, but I have to ask, why Meridian? We're hardly the most attractive acquisition target in the current market." I allowed myself a small smile. "Let's just say I have a personal interest in seeing this company succeed, Mr. Gaines. I believe in its potential, even if its current leadership hasn't recognized it." Something in my tone made him look at me more carefully. "Have we met before, Ms. Mitchell?" "Yes," I said, meeting his gaze directly. "3 times, actually. You rejected my application 3 separate times. Once for your call center right out of high school. Once for your internship program during college, and once for your management training program after I graduated summa cum laude." The confusion on his face slowly transformed into recognition. You're one of the Mitchell family, the factory workers." "That's right," I confirmed. "The Mitchell girl with the attitude problem. The one who wouldn't stay in her lane." The room fell completely silent. I could almost hear their minds racing, reassessing everything about the situation and about me. "Our offer stands for 48 hours, I continued, gathering my materials. "I suggest you take it. It's the best one you're going to get." As I stood to leave, Gaines found his voice. Again. "Ms. Mitchell, Tessa, you have to understand. Our hiring decisions weren't personal." I cut him off. "They felt personal to me, Mr. Gaines, but that's not why I'm here today. I'm here because despite your best efforts to prove otherwise, this company has value. And now you have to decide if your pride is worth more than Meridian's future." I left them to their deliberations and walked back through the hallways, past employees who had no idea their fates were being decided. I wondered if my family knew I was there, if word had spread that Mitchell was meeting with the board. I wondered what they would think when they found out. The answer came sooner than expected. As I exited the main doors, I nearly collided with my father, heading in for his shift. "Tessa?" he said, clearly surprised. "What are you doing here?" Looking at him, the same lunchbox he'd carried for 20 years, the same resigned posture, the same acceptance of limitations, I felt a complex mixture of emotions. Love, frustration, vindication, and something like pity. "I had a meeting," I said simply, "with the board." "The board? Why would you—" He stopped, taking in my expensive suit, my confident stance. "What's going on, Tessa?" Before I could answer, my phone rang. It was Lauren from Blackridge. "They've accepted," she said without preamble. "They want to finalize as soon as possible." "Thank you, Lauren. I'll be in touch shortly." I hung up and faced my father again. "Dad," I said, "we should talk. Things at Meridian are about to change." The look on my father's face as I explained that I had just purchased Meridian Industries is something I'll never forget. Confusion gave way to disbelief, then something between pride and fear. "You bought the company?" he repeated, lowering his voice as coworkers passed by. "That's not possible. You're barely 30. I guided him to a bench outside the main entrance, away from curious ears. Blackridge Partners provided most of the capital, but yes, I led the acquisition. I'll be installed as CEO within the month. He stared at his worn work boots, processing. "So you're saying, I work for you now?" "We all do?" The question hung in the air. In my detailed planning, in all my vindication fantasies, I hadn't fully considered this aspect, that my triumph would complicate my family relationships in ways I couldn't predict. Technically, yes. But Dad, that's not why I did this. He looked up, his eyes narrowing slightly. Then why? To prove a point? The defensiveness in his voice stung, but I couldn't blame him. His worldview was being dismantled in real time. "Because Meridian is failing," I explained, softening my tone. "The board has been hiding it, but without intervention, the company would close within 18 months. Everyone would lose their jobs. You, Jake, Melissa, Connor. The whole town would collapse." His expression shifted as the implications sank in. "And you think you can fix it?" "I know I can. But I'll need help, from people who understand this place from the inside." For a moment, I saw a glimmer of the father I remembered from early childhood, before disappointment and resignation had dulled his outlook. He straightened his posture slightly. "You always were the stubborn one," he said, with something almost like pride. "So, what happens now, boss?" The word boss carried a hint of sarcasm but also acceptance. It was a start. "Now," I said, standing, and checking my watch. "I have a call with our investors, and you have a shift to start. But tonight, dinner at the house? We should talk to everyone together." He nodded, then hesitated before asking, "Does your mother know yet?" "No one knows, except the board. I'd like to tell the family myself before rumors start." "They're going to think you've lost your mind," he warned, but with a hint of a smile. "Wouldn't be the first time." As he badged into the building, I heard him mutter, "My daughter, the CEO of Meridian. What the hell is happening?" I wondered the same thing. The Mitchell family dinner that night made Thanksgiving political arguments look tame by comparison. My mother dropped a casserole dish when I made my announcement. Connor laughed, thinking it was an elaborate joke. Melissa kept asking if I was in legal trouble. Only Jake remained quiet, studying me with new eyes. "This is insanity," my mother finally declared. "You can't just walk in and buy a company like Meridian." "Actually, she can," my father corrected, surprising me with his support. "I checked with Phil in accounting. The paperwork's already being processed. It's happening." "But why?" Melissa demanded. "To embarrass us? To show everyone you're better than us?" The accusation hurt more than I expected. "That's not it at all," I insisted. "Meridian is in trouble. The board has been hiding it, but they've been losing contracts for years. Without new leadership and direction, everyone would be out of work within a year or two." "So you're what? Our savior?" Connor scoffed. "Coming down from your big city job to rescue the simple hometown folks?" "Connor," my father warned. "No. Let him finish," I said. "I want to hear what everyone really thinks." Connor leaned forward. "I think you've always thought you were too good for this place, for this family. You went off to play big shot in Chicago while we stayed here doing the real work. And now you're buying our company? How are we supposed to feel about that?" The room fell silent. Part of me wanted to fire back, to remind him of every dismissive comment, every time they'd laughed at my ambitions. But that wouldn't help. "I understand why it seems that way," I said carefully. "But this isn't about proving anything. It's about saving jobs, yours included. Meridian hasn't innovated in 20 years. Their equipment is obsolete, their contracts are drying up, and their leadership has been asleep at the wheel." "And you know better?" Melissa asked, less hostile but still skeptical. About some things, yes, I admitted. I've spent the last 5 years analyzing companies exactly like Meridian, identifying what makes them succeed or fail. This isn't personal, it's business. Jake, who had remained quiet until now, finally spoke. She's right about the company, struggling. All eyes turned to him. I've seen the production reports. We're operating at 60% capacity, down from 90 just 3 years ago. The writing's been on the wall. A silence fell over the table as this confirmation sank in. So what happens now? My mother asked, her voice smaller than I'd ever heard it. Do we still have jobs? Of course you do, I assured her. No one in this family will lose their position, but things at Meridian will need to change, substantially, if the company is going to survive. What kind of changes? My father asked. I took a deep breath. Modernization of equipment, retraining programs, new product lines. It's going to be difficult, and not everyone will be happy with the decisions I'll have to make. That's why I'm telling you this first, so you understand what's coming. Connor pushed back from the table. This is just perfect. Little sister comes home to show us all how it's done. Connor, my father started. No, Dad. You always told us to know our place, to be grateful for what Meridian gave us. Now she buys the company, and suddenly you're fine with all that reach for the stars bull. That's enough, my father interrupted, his voice firm. You haven't heard a word she's said. This isn't about us versus her. This is about the company failing, our jobs, our town, and her trying to save it. Connor stared at our father in disbelief, then at me, then grabbed his jacket. I need some air. The front door slammed behind him. Melissa looked torn. He'll come around, she offered, though she didn't sound convinced. It's just a lot to take in. I know, I acknowledged. For all of you. But I need to know, can I count on your support? Because what's coming won't be easy. My mother reached across the table to take my hand, the first genuinely warm gesture she'd offered since I'd arrived. You were always the one who saw things differently, she said softly. Maybe that's exactly what Meridian needs right now. Coming from her, it was everything. My first official day as CEO of Meridian Industries arrived 2 weeks later. The announcement had gone out company-wide the day before, causing a tsunami of reactions ranging from outrage to cautious optimism. The old guard executives were particularly vocal in their skepticism. Many had submitted immediate resignations, which I'd accepted without protest. Change would be easier without entrenched resistance. Walking through the front doors that morning felt surreal. The security guard who had once turned me away for an interview now scrambled to hold the door. Good morning, Ms. Mitchell. Rebecca Winters, my newly appointed chief of staff, recruited from my Chicago network, walked beside me, briefing me on the day's schedule. The department heads are waiting in the conference room. After that, you have the employee town hall at 10, then lunch with the union representatives. And the walkthrough of the production floor? Scheduled for 2 o'clock, she confirmed. Your brother Jake will lead the tour. I had asked Jake to be my guide specifically. Of all my siblings, he had the most comprehensive knowledge of the actual manufacturing operations, and he'd been the quickest to move past his initial shock and offer support. The department heads' meeting was tense but productive. These were the second-tier managers who had chosen to stay despite the ownership change, some out of loyalty to Meridian, others simply because jobs were scarce in Lakefield. Most were men 10 to 20 years my senior, who regarded me with thinly veiled skepticism. We've compiled 5 years of operational data, I began, distributing tablets with the analysis. As you can see, Meridian has been in steady decline across all metrics: productivity, market share, profit margins. Today isn't about assigning blame. It's about charting a path forward. Martin Weber, the production manager, spoke first. With all due respect, Ms. Mitchell, We've weathered downturns before. The market always cycles back. Not this time, I countered, bringing up a market analysis on the main screen. The manufacturing landscape has fundamentally changed. Companies that haven't adapted to automation, sustainable practices, and supply chain integration are disappearing. Meridian has coasted on reputation and established contracts, but those advantages have evaporated. For the next hour, I outlined my vision: modernizing equipment to increase efficiency, retraining workers for more technical roles, diversifying our product lines to serve emerging markets, and implementing lean manufacturing principles. I emphasized that while change was coming, mass layoffs were not part of the plan. Instead, I explained, we'll institute a gradual transition. As departments modernize, we'll retrain employees for new roles. No one who wants to remain with Meridian will be left behind. By the meeting's end, I'd detected a shift in the room, from defensive skepticism to cautious engagement. They weren't fully convinced, but they were listening. The employee town hall was a different challenge entirely. The company auditorium was packed, buzzing with anxiety and curiosity. I recognized many faces: neighbors, parents of childhood friends, former classmates. People who had known me as the Mitchell girl with big ideas are now watching me take the stage as their boss. Many of you knew me growing up, I began, abandoning the formal speech I'd prepared. You watched me leave Lakefield, and maybe you thought I was rejecting this town, this company, and what it stands for. I paused, surveying the faces. Some hostile, some curious, many simply worried. The truth is more complicated. I left because I had to find my own path. But I never stopped thinking about Meridian, about the people whose livelihoods depend on this company, about what would happen to Lakefield if Meridian failed. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. I won't sugarcoat this. Meridian is in trouble. We've been losing ground to competitors for years. The board kept this information from you, hoping things would turn around on their own. They won't. The murmurs grew louder. I held up a hand. I didn't come back just to deliver bad news. I came back because I believe Meridian can thrive again, but only if we're willing to evolve, to work differently, to build something better than what came before. For the next 40 minutes, I outlined the same vision I'd shared with the department heads, emphasizing job security through transition and growth opportunities through training. I announced an immediate 5% raise for floor workers, a goodwill gesture that wouldn't solve all problems but would demonstrate commitment to valuing their contributions. The questions afterward were direct, sometimes confrontational. I answered each one honestly, refusing to make promises I couldn't keep. By the end, the mood had shifted from hostile skepticism to cautious wait and see. As the employees filed out, I spotted Connor at the back of the room. He hadn't spoken. During the Q&A, had barely acknowledged me since the family dinner. Our gazes met briefly before he turned and walked out. One battle at a time, I reminded myself. The production floor tour with Jake that afternoon proved enlightening. Unlike the executives who had spent years hiding problems, Jake showed me everything: inefficient workflows, outdated machinery barely, held together with makeshift repairs, safety issues that had been repeatedly reported and ignored. No one upstairs ever comes down here, he explained as we walked between massive stamping machines. They make decisions based on spreadsheets, not what's actually happening on the floor. That ends now, I promised. We'll be implementing a new management structure. Department heads will be required to spend at least 10 hours weekly on the production floor, experiencing the results of their decisions firsthand. Jake nodded approvingly. That'll definitely get attention. We paused near a particularly ancient piece of equipment, where an older worker was performing what looked like a complex workaround procedure. That's Frank Wilson, Jake explained. Been here 32 years. That machine should have been replaced a decade ago, but Frank's the only one who can still make it work. I approached the worker. Mr. Wilson, I'm Tessa Mitchell. He looked up, wiping his hands on a rag. I know who you are. You're Robert's girl. No mention of my new position, just my relationship to my father. In Lakefield, family connections still trumped titles. I am, I acknowledged. Jake tells me you're the only one who can operate this dinosaur. Frank patted the machine with surprising affection. She's temperamental, but she gets the job done. Mind if I ask, if you could, replace it with any modern equivalent? What would you choose? He looked surprised at the question, then thoughtful. The Komatsu TX550. Faster, more precise, fraction of the maintenance. But they cost about $300,000, I finished for him. And how much production time do you lose to maintenance on this one? 2-3 days a month. Easy. I did the quick mental calculation. And how many orders get delayed because of that downtime? Last month. 17. I nodded, making notes on my tablet. Mr. Wilson, I'd like you to be part of the team that selects our new equipment. Your expertise would be invaluable. The surprise on his face was quickly masked by a gruff nod. About time somebody asked the people who actually use the machines. We walked away. Jake gave me an approving look. Smart move. It's not strategy, I told him honestly. It's common sense. The people doing the work know what works. By day's end, I'd filled pages with notes, identified immediate priorities, and begun forming a clearer picture of what Meridian could become. I was in my new office, formerly Richard Gaines's spacious corner suite, which I'd already scheduled for conversion into a shared collaborative workspace, when Rebecca knocked on the door. Your 5 o'clock is here. I checked my calendar, confused. I don't have a 5 o'clock. He was quite insistent, she said with a slight smile. Said to tell you that you still owe him for covering your shift at Dave's Diner 10 years ago? I couldn't help but laugh. Send him in. Michael Sullivan, Mike to everyone who knew him, strolled in with the same easy confidence he'd had since high school. We'd waited tables together at the local diner during my senior year, before I left for college, and he went to work for his father's construction company. So the rumors are true, he said, looking around the executive office. Tessa, Mitchell running the show. Trying to, I corrected, giving him a quick hug. What brings you by, Mike? Not just to collect on that ancient debt, I hope. He leaned against the desk. Sullivan Construction has been trying to get on Meridian's vendor list for 3 years. Your predecessor wasn't interested in working with local companies, said we couldn't compete with the big regional firms on price. And can you? Within 5%, he admitted. But we make up for it in quality and accountability. When something goes wrong with a project, and something always does, you're not calling a corporate office 3 states away. You're calling me. I live 6 blocks from here. I considered this. Supporting local businesses would generate goodwill in the community, potentially offsetting some of the resistance to other changes. But I couldn't make decisions based solely on hometown connections. Send me your proposal, I said. I'll have our facilities team review it. If you're as good as you claim, we can start with a small project and see how it goes. He grinned. That's all I'm asking for, a fair shot. After he left, I stood at the window overlooking Lakefield. The town had shrunk in my memory during my years away, but its importance had grown. Meridian wasn't just a company to be turned around for profit. It was the economic heart of this community. My phone buzzed with a text from Lauren at Blackridge. How's day 1 as the hometown hero? I typed back. Less hero, more villain at the moment, but making progress. Her response came quickly. Remember, you can't save Meridian by being liked. You save it by being right. As the setting sun cast long shadows across the manufacturing floor below, I thought about the dual nature of my homecoming, the personal vindication of proving my worth to those who had dismissed me, alongside the genuine responsibility of saving a company that hundreds of families depended on. The personal triumph would feel hollow if I failed at the larger mission. But if I succeeded, perhaps the two could be reconciled. Perhaps the Mitchell who refused to stay in her lane could widen the road for everyone else. With renewed determination, I turned back to my desk and the mountain of work ahead. Day 1 was ending, but the real challenge was just beginning. 3. Months into my tenure as CEO of Meridian Industries, the initial shock had worn off, replaced by the grinding reality of corporate transformation. Each morning began before sunrise with international supplier calls and ended well after dark with planning sessions for the next day's battles. The path from vindication to actual success proved steeper than even my detailed analyses had predicted. The resistance came from expected and unexpected places. The old guard managers who had stayed on were predictably obstructionist, implementing changes with grudging minimalism. More surprising was the wariness from the workers themselves, the very people my reforms were designed to benefit. Decades of broken promises from previous management had left them cynical about change, regardless of who was leading it. Even within my family, the dynamics remained complicated. My father and Jake had become quiet allies, helping translate my corporate strategies into language the floor workers could understand and trust. My mother oscillated between pride in my accomplishments and worry over the pressure I was under. Melissa maintained a cautious neutrality, waiting to see how things would play out. Connor remained the holdout. He had transferred to second shift to avoid direct interaction with me, and the few times we crossed paths, his resentment was palpable. The brother who had once taught me to ride a bike now barely acknowledged my existence. Give him time, my father advised one evening when I stopped by the house for a rare family dinner. His whole world got turned upside down. All of ours did, I pointed out, helping my mother clear the dishes. The rest of you are adapting. Connor's always defined himself by his place at Meridian, my mother said quietly. Now his little sister runs the place. It's complicated. For him? I understood the theory but had little patience for it in practice. Every day spent nursing wounded egos was a day the company fell further behind our transformation timeline. The next morning brought crisis. Our largest client, Denton Automotive, had called an emergency meeting. Their purchasing director, Alan Marsh, had been making increasingly pointed inquiries about our modernization progress, clearly concerned about our ability to meet their needs moving forward. This is a courtesy meeting, Rebecca warned as we prepared. Word is they've already been in talks with Precision Manufacturing in Ohio. Losing Denton would be catastrophic. They represented nearly 30% of our current business. Without their contracts, the already precarious financial runway for our transformation would evaporate. I assembled a small team for the meeting. Myself, our head of production, our newly hired innovation director, and, in a move that raised eyebrows, Jake. Why am I here? He asked as we drove to Denton's regional headquarters. I'm just a line supervisor. Because you understand the actual manufacturing process better than anyone in the executive suite, I explained. When they ask technical questions about implementation, I need someone who can answer honestly and knowledgeably. The Denton team consisted of 7 people, including Alan Marsh and their Chief Operations Officer, Patricia Lang. The tone was immediately confrontational. Let's cut to the chase, Marsh began. We've been patient with Meridian's transition, but our production schedule can't accommodate missed deadlines or quality issues. We need concrete assurances that you can meet our requirements moving forward. I nodded, acknowledging the concern without defensiveness. You're right to be concerned. The transition period has created challenges, but rather than offer you promises, I'd prefer to show you exactly where we stand and where we're headed. For the next hour, my team and I presented our modernization roadmap with complete transparency. The equipment already upgraded, the retraining programs in progress, the quality control improvements already showing results. When technical questions arose, I deferred to Jake, whose hands-on knowledge proved invaluable. Your brother knows his stuff, Patricia Lang commented during a break, surprising me with her awareness of our relationship. He does, I agreed. He's been at Meridian for 15 years, started on the floor right out of high school. She studied me thoughtfully. And you went a different route. Chicago, venture capital, now back as CEO. Interesting family dynamic. You could say that. My brother works for me too, she offered unexpectedly. Not quite the same circumstance, but similar challenges. Family-business relationships are complicated. I hadn't considered that the Denton executive might relate to my situation, but her insight created an unexpected connection. As the meeting resumed, the tone shifted subtly from interrogation to collaborative problem-solving. By the end, we had secured not just Denton's continued business, but a 6-month window to complete our critical upgrades before their next major contract renewal. As we left the building, Jake gave me an approving nod. That went better than expected. Thanks to you, I acknowledged. Your floor knowledge saved us in there. He shrugged off the compliment, but I could tell he was pleased. I've been thinking about that new production workflow you proposed, he said as we drove back. It's solid in theory, but there's a bottleneck in the transition between stations 4 and 5. Show me. He sketched the problem on his tablet, explaining the real-world complications that didn't appear in the theoretical models. By the time we reached Meridian, we had developed 3 potential solutions to test. You should be in the strategy meetings, I told him as we walked in. Your practical perspective would balance the consultant's theoretical approaches. He looked uncomfortable. Those meetings are for management. I'm just the person who just helped save our biggest client, I interrupted. Position titles are less important than insight, Jake. I need people who understand this business from the ground up. That evening, I made a decision that would accelerate both our transformation and the family dynamics. I promoted Jake to Director of Manufacturing Operations, bypassing 2 levels of hierarchy and several longer-tenured managers. The announcement sent shockwaves through the company. The executive floor buzzed with accusations of nepotism, while the production workers seemed torn between pride that one of their own had ascended and suspicion about his new allegiance. He addressed the controversy head-on at the weekly leadership meeting. Jake Mitchell's promotion is based on merit, not family connection, I stated firmly. Anyone questioning that need only review the Denton account situation. His manufacturing knowledge saved our largest client relationship. Martin Weber, the production manager who had been skeptical from day one, spoke up. With respect, Ms. Mitchell, there are several managers with more seniority and formal qualifications who were overlooked. Seniority isn't the same as innovation or effectiveness, I countered. The management structure of Meridian is changing to reflect contributions, not time served. Those uncomfortable with that reality are welcome to discuss separation packages. Message was clear. The old guard could adapt or depart. By week's end, 3 long-tenured managers had resigned, creating space for more forward-thinking replacements. The family dinner that Sunday was even more tense than usual. Connor finally broke his silence on the matter, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. So Jake gets to be an executive now. How convenient. Jake set down his fork. It wasn't my idea, Connor. Of course it wasn't. It was hers. Connor jerked his head toward me without making eye contact. First buy the company, then install the family as management. What's next? Mom gets to be CFO? That's enough, my father interjected, but I raised a hand. Let him speak, Dad. Better to have this out in the open. Connor finally looked at me, directly. You want it in the open? Fine. You come back after abandoning this family for years, buy the company that's given us stability, start turning everything upside down, and then promote Jake over people who've dedicated their careers to Meridian. How is that fair? Fair, I repeated, feeling my own anger rise. What was fair about being told I'd never amount to anything? What was fair about Meridian rejecting me 3 times despite my qualifications? What's fair about the company running itself into the ground while pretending everything was fine? Here we go, Connor muttered. Poor Tessa, so oppressed by her working-class family. I never said that, I snapped, then took a breath to regain composure. This isn't about the past, Connor. It's about Meridian's future. Jake's promotion wasn't about family. It was about having the right person in the right role to save this company. And I'm not the right person? Is that it? The hurt beneath his anger finally surfaced. I've given 12 years to Meridian. I know that place inside and out. The realization hit me then. This wasn't just about resentment of my success or Jake's promotion. Connor felt overlooked, undervalued. You are valuable to Meridian, I said, softening my tone. But you've been avoiding me for months. How am I supposed to know what you can contribute if you won't even talk to me? A heavy silence fell over the table. Connor pushed back his chair and stood. My shift starts in an hour, he said, though we all knew it didn't. Thanks for dinner, Mom. After he left, my mother sighed. He's been like this since you made the announcement about Jake. I can turn it down, Jake offered, surprising me. If it would help. Absolutely not, I said firmly. Meridian needs you in that role. Connor needs to understand this isn't a zero-sum game. Maybe he needs to hear that from you, my father suggested. Not as CEO, but as his sister. The next day, I did something I hadn't done since taking over Meridian. I left work early. Armed with Connor's schedule and a six-pack of the craft beer he favored, I drove to Lakefield Park, where he sometimes went to fish after second shift. Sure enough, his truck was in the parking lot. I found him at the small pier, line cast into the water, exactly as he used to sit when we were teenagers, and he needed to clear his head. Without a word, I sat beside him and offered a beer. Playing hooky from running the company? He asked, but accepted the bottle. Executive privilege, I replied. We sat in silence for a while, watching the line bob in the water. Finally, I said, I didn't come back to show anyone up, Connor. He snorted softly. Could have fooled me. I'm serious. The vindication part. That was real. I won't pretend it wasn't. But it's not why I'm staying. Meridian matters. Not just to our family, but to everyone in Lakefield. So you're the town savior now? No. I'm a businesswoman who sees potential where others saw decline. And I need good people who understand Meridian from the inside to help realize that potential. He reeled in his empty line and recast. You've got Jake for that now. Jake has specific skills, but he's not you. I turned to face him directly. What do you actually want, Connor? Because if it's to keep things exactly as they were, I can't help with that. Meridian was dying under that model. I know that, he admitted, surprising me. I'm not blind. I've seen the numbers, even if management tried to hide them. Then what? He was quiet for a long moment. I've spent over a decade learning every aspect of that assembly process. I've submitted 23 process improvement suggestions over the years. Not one was implemented, not one was even acknowledged. Then you waltz in with your fancy degree and investors, and suddenly everything's changing. The hurt in his voice was unmistakable. You wanted to be part of the solution, but no one would listen. Something like that, he muttered, taking a long drink. I thought carefully about my next words. The modernization plan includes a new position, implementation specialist. Someone to work between design and production, ensuring new processes are practical for actual manufacturing conditions. It requires deep knowledge of the current systems and ability to envision improvements. He looked at me suspiciously. Are you offering me a job? I'm describing a role that needs filling by someone qualified. If you're interested, submit your application like anyone else. You'll be evaluated on your merits, not your last name. By you? By Jake and the production team, I clarified. I'll recuse myself from the decision. He seemed to consider this, then asked, And if I don't get it? Then you keep your current position. No penalty. But Connor, I leaned closer. Don't sabotage yourself to spite me. You're better than that. We stayed until sunset, talking more, openly than we had in years, about Meridian, about our divergent paths, about the pressure of family expectations. By the time we packed up to leave, no magical reconciliation had occurred, but a door had opened. 3 days later, Connor submitted his application for the implementation specialist role. 6 months into the transformation, Meridian hit its first significant milestone. The newly modernized production line ran at full capacity for 1 week without a single quality issue or breakdown. The efficiency improvements were already translating to the bottom line, with production costs down 15% and output up nearly 20%. To mark the achievement, I authorized a company-wide bonus and organized a celebration on the factory floor rather than in the executive wing. As employees enjoyed catered lunch from local restaurants, I took the opportunity to recognize key contributors to the turnaround. This milestone belongs to all of you, I told the assembled workforce, particularly those who embrace change rather than resisting it. I called forward several employees for special recognition, including Frank Wilson, who had been instrumental in selecting and implementing the new machinery, and Connor, whose work as implementation specialist had smoothed countless transition issues. The surprise on Connor's face when I called his name was genuine. Our professional relationship remained cautiously formal despite our improved personal understanding. As I handed him the recognition certificate and bonus check, he actually smiled. The team did the real work, he said quietly. The team followed your lead, I corrected. You've earned this, fair and square. As the celebration continued, I found myself speaking with a group of employees I'd never formally met, including Sarah Daniels, a quality control specialist who had worked at Meridian for 8 years. I need to thank you, she said, catching me off guard. For? The parental leave policy. My wife and I are expecting our first child in August. Under the old policy, I would have gotten 2 weeks unpaid. Now I'll have 3 months at partial pay. I'd implemented the new policy as part of a comprehensive benefits overhaul, one of many changes designed to bring Meridian in line with more progressive workplaces. Congratulations, I said sincerely. That's wonderful news. We were actually considering moving to Minneapolis for better benefits before the changes here, she admitted. Now we're staying. Lakefield is home. Throughout the day, I heard similar stories. Employees who had been on the verge of leaving, families who had been struggling under the old wage structure, young workers who suddenly saw career paths where, before they'd seen only dead ends. These personal impacts had been theoretical when I'd developed the transformation strategy at Black Ridge. The financial models accounted for improved retention and productivity, but couldn't capture the human element, the renewed hope, the restored dignity of work, well compensated and respected. That evening, Lauren from Black Ridge called for our monthly update. The numbers look good, she said after reviewing the latest reports. You're tracking ahead of projection on efficiency metrics and just slightly behind on market expansion. We'll close that gap in Q3, I assured her. The new product line launches next month. The board is impressed, Tessa. There was significant skepticism about putting a 30-year-old in charge of this turnaround, especially given your personal connection to the company. I smiled at the understatement. The personal connection has been both a challenge and an advantage. How so? I considered the question carefully. The trust issues were steeper because of my family relationships, but that same connection gave me insights into the company culture that an outside CEO would have taken months to develop. There was a pause before Lauren asked, "And has it been worth it, personally speaking?" The question caught me off guard. Black Ridge Partners rarely delved into the personal aspects of business. It's been complicated, I admitted. The vindication I expected hasn't quite materialized in the way I imagined. Instead, it's evolved into something else. Something better? I thought about the celebration earlier that day, about Sarah Daniels and her growing family, about Frank, Wilson's pride in the new equipment, about Connor's reluctant smile as his contributions were recognized. Something more meaningful, I finally answered. The chip on my shoulder about being rejected has faded. Now it's about building something that lasts, something that matters to hundreds of families. That's growth, Lauren observed. Just make sure the transformation stays on track. Sentiment doesn't pay investor returns. After the call, I stayed late in my office, reviewing the upcoming quarterly projections. The next phase would be even more challenging, expanding into new markets while maintaining the quality improvements we'd achieved. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Jake stood there holding a small package. "Found something you might want to see?" he said, placing it on my desk. Inside the box was a newspaper clipping, yellowed with age, from the Lakefield Herald. The headline read, "Local Student Wins State Business Competition." Below was a photo of me at 16, holding a trophy for a business plan I'd developed for a school project. "Where did you find this?" I asked, surprised. "Connor had it. Found it when we were cleaning out the storage closet near Station 3. It was in an old employee bulletin board collection." I studied the photo, remembering the competition. My business plan had been for a manufacturing company that made customized parts for renewable energy systems. Not so different from one of the new product lines we were currently developing for Meridian. "Guess you've been planning this takeover longer than any of us realized," Jake said with a smile. "Not a takeover," I corrected. "A transformation." As he left, I pinned the clipping to my office wall, not as a reminder of past vindication, but as evidence of continuity. The girl with the business plan and the woman executing the turnaround strategy weren't as disconnected as I'd sometimes felt. The core vision had remained consistent, even as the motivations evolved. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother. "Family dinner Sunday? Connor's making his famous chili." Such a simple invitation, yet loaded with significance. Connor cooking meant he was fully participating again, the family unit cautiously reforming around our new reality. I texted back, "Wouldn't miss it." Setting down the phone, I turned to the window overlooking the production floor. The evening shift was in full swing, the newly efficient line moving with a rhythm that had been absent when I arrived. On the supervisor's platform, Connor was deep in conversation with a technician, gesturing toward one of the stations with the focused intensity he brought to problems he was determined to solve. The company that had rejected me, rejected all of us from advancing beyond our assigned stations, was becoming something new. Not through vengeance or vindication, but through vision and persistent effort. The family that had told me I'd never amount to anything was finding new ways to define success, to relate to each other, to grow beyond the limitations we'd accepted as immutable. Perhaps that was the most meaningful transformation of all. 1 year into Meridian's transformation, the winds of change brought unexpected challenges. What began as whispers from our supply chain partners soon crystallized into concrete intelligence. Apex Manufacturing, our largest competitor, was making aggressive moves to acquire several smaller manufacturers in the region. Their strategy was clear: consolidate the market, squeeze out mid-sized competitors like Meridian, and dominate the industry. They've already purchased Wilson Fabrication in Ohio, Rebecca reported during our executive briefing. Sources say they're in talks with Patterson Metalworks and Eastern Components. The implications were serious. If Apex succeeded in their acquisition spree, they would control enough market share to pressure our clients on price while locking up key supply chains. "What's their endgame with us?" Jake asked, studying the market analysis on his tablet. 3 possibilities, I said. "Destroy us through competition, force us to sell at a discount, or absorb us on their terms." Martin Weber, now fully on board with our transformation after seeing the results, leaned forward. "Can we outbid them for these acquisitions? Play their game?" I shook my head. "We don't have the capital reserves for an acquisition war. We've committed most of our resources to modernization. So, what's the play? Connor asked. In the months since taking the implementation specialist role, he had become an invaluable part of the leadership team, his deep knowledge of production processes balancing my strategic perspective. I stood and walked to the whiteboard. If we can't match their size, we focus on areas where being nimble gives us advantages. For the next hour, we outlined what would become known as the precision strategy. Rather than competing with Apex on their terms, we would specialize in high-precision, custom manufacturing that their larger, less flexible operations couldn't match efficiently. We would position Meridian not as a general manufacturer, but as the premier solution for complex, high-tolerance components that required adaptive processes and specialized knowledge. This shifts our target market, Rebecca pointed out. The aerospace and medical device sectors demand precision, but their qualification processes are rigorous. Which is exactly why they're underserved by giants like Apex, I countered. Big operations struggle with customization and small batch specialization. We're already more efficient than we were a year ago. Now we become more specialized too. The strategy required another significant pivot. More advanced equipment, specialized training for key personnel, and a completely restructured sales approach. The financial projections showed tight margins for the first 6 months before profitability would improve substantially. It was a gamble, but a calculated one. Blackridge won't like extending the transformation timeline, Martin warned. They expected a standard turnaround. Leave Blackridge to me, I said. This isn't a deviation from our plan. It's an evolution, based on market realities. The call with Lauren that evening was predictably tense. You're asking for an additional $8 million in capital expenditures and 6 more months of depressed earnings, she summarized, her voice carefully neutral. The partners will have concerns. The partners should be concerned about Apex's acquisition strategy, I countered. Our original plan assumed a relatively stable, competitive landscape. That's no longer the case. And you're certain this specialization pivot is the right response? Not seeking a buyer while Meridian's value is at its peak? The suggestion sparked an unexpected surge of protectiveness. Meridian wasn't just an investment vehicle. It had become something I was building, something tied to hundreds of families' futures. Selling now would waste the groundwork we've laid, I argued. The precision manufacturing market has higher margins and stickier client relationships. Once we're established, our valuation will far exceed what we could get in a defensive sale. I was quiet for a moment. You've become very attached to this company, Tessa. I've become committed to the strategy I believe will generate the best long-term returns, I corrected, keeping my response firmly in the language of business. If Blackridge prefers a quick exit, I understand. But I'm prepared to find alternative financing if necessary. It was a bold statement, perhaps too bold, but I meant it. I'd begun quietly exploring options with other investment groups who specialized in longer transformation timelines. No need for dramatic gestures, Lauren said, and I could hear the slight smile in her voice. Send me the detailed projections for this precision strategy. If they're as solid as you claim, I'll advocate with the partners. The next phase of Meridian's evolution began in earnest the following week. The precision pivot required not just new equipment, but a culture shift. From the volume-focused mentality of traditional manufacturing to the exacting standards of aerospace and medical components, where tolerances were measured in microns and defect rates needed to approach zero. For this transition, Connor proved unexpectedly essential. His meticulous nature, which had sometimes made him seem inflexible, became a perfect match for the precision-focused environment. He developed an intensive training program for the production teams, translating complex technical requirements into practical workflows that made sense to people who had spent careers in traditional manufacturing. The key, he explained during a company-wide training session, is understanding that we're not just making parts anymore. We're making components that people's lives will depend on. A tiny imperfection in a medical implant or aerospace connector isn't just a quality issue, it's potentially catastrophic for the end user. His passion for the exacting standards was infectious. Workers who had initially greeted the pivot with skepticism began to take pride in mastering the more demanding processes. The shop floor gradually transformed from a place where people simply completed tasks to one where they practiced a specialized craft. 6 weeks into the precision strategy implementation, we received an unexpected opportunity. Kessler Medical Devices, a leading manufacturer of surgical robots, was seeking a new supplier for critical articulation components after quality issues with their current vendor. They need a prototype batch of 50 units in 3 weeks, Rebecca reported. If we can deliver to spec, it could lead to a multi-year contract worth 8 figures annually. The timeline was nearly impossible with our resources still in transition, but the opportunity was too valuable to pass up. I called an emergency meeting of the core team. We need to create a skunkworks unit, I proposed. Pull our best people, dedicate our most advanced equipment, and focus exclusively on this Kessler bid. Jake shook his head. That disrupts production for existing clients. We can't afford to drop balls right now. We can't afford to miss this opportunity either, I countered. This is exactly the kind of high-precision, high-margin client our strategy targets. Connor, who had been quietly reviewing the Kessler specifications, looked up. We can do it without disrupting current production, but not with standard shifts and processes. All eyes turned to him. I need 6 people from the precision team, 24-hour access to the new CNC machines, and authority to adjust workflows without going through standard approval channels, he continued. We run a parallel operation, separate from the main production, with rotating shifts. That's asking a lot from the team, Martin cautioned. Which is why it needs to be voluntary, with significant success bonuses, Connor replied. People who want the challenge and the reward. The skunkworks approach was unorthodox for Meridian's historically rigid structure, but it aligned perfectly with the more agile company we were building. I approved the plan on the spot. Make it happen, I told Connor. Whatever resources you need. The Kessler project became a round-the-clock operation. Connor assembled a team that included both veteran machinists like Frank Wilson and younger employees who had quickly adapted to the precision requirements. They commandeered a corner of the production floor, transforming it into a specialized workspace with its own quality control station and dedicated tooling. I found myself drawn to the skunkworks area during late evenings, watching the focused intensity of the team as they refined processes and solved problems in real time. Connor often worked alongside them, hands-on with the machinery, demonstrating a leadership style I hadn't seen from him before. Collaborative, innovative, and resolutely focused on the goal. You've built something special here, I commented. One night, bringing coffee to the team during a critical phase of the prototype development, Connor looked up from the metrology equipment he was calibrating. He corrected. This is everyone's project. But you're leading it, I pointed out. And effectively. He seemed momentarily uncomfortable with the praise, then shrugged. It's easier to lead when people understand what's at stake. Everyone here knows landing Kessler means stability, growth, a chance to do work that matters. 2 days before the deadline, disaster struck. A critical shipment of specialized alloy, essential for the final components, was delayed due to weather, issues at the supplier's facility in Colorado. Without that material, we can't complete the prototypes, Connor reported grimly during an emergency meeting. I've called every supplier in the region. No one has this specific alloy in stock. The clock was ticking. Failing to meet Kessler's deadline would not only lose us the potential contract, but damage our reputation in the precision market before we'd fully established ourselves. What about Wright Metallurgy in Chicago? I suggested, remembering a small, specialty supplier I'd worked with during my time there. They focus on aerospace-grade materials. Already tried them, Connor said. 6-week lead time. We were running out of options when Jake, who had been quietly making calls in the corner, rejoined the conversation. Sometimes the most powerful response to being told you'll never amount to anything isn't proving critics wrong. It's creating something so undeniably right that it transforms the very standard by which success is measured. 3 years after purchasing Meridian Industries, I stood at the podium in the company's newly constructed conference center, facing an audience that would have been unimaginable when my journey began. Industry leaders, regional economic officials, journalists, and, most importantly, Meridian employees filled the room for what the business press had dubbed the Lakefield Summit on American Manufacturing Innovation. Welcome to the new Meridian. Industries, I began, still somewhat amazed by the transformation myself. Many of you remember this company as a traditional parts manufacturer struggling to survive in a changing marketplace. Today, we're a leader in precision components for medical, aerospace, and emerging technology sectors, with growth rates that exceed industry standards by more than double. The statistics projected behind me told a compelling story. 127% revenue, growth over 3 years, workforce expanded by 40%, average wages increased by 35%, 5 new patents filed, and strategic partnerships with leading technology firms in 3 countries. This isn't just Meridian's story, I continued. It's the story of American manufacturing finding new pathways to thrive in the 21st century, not by competing on volume or racing to the bottom on price, but by leveraging our inherent advantages: innovation, quality, specialized expertise, and adaptability. As I outlined the Precision Partnership Initiative, a collaborative framework we had developed to help other mid-sized manufacturers navigate similar transformations, I caught sight of my family in the front row. My parents, beaming with undisguised pride. Jake, nodding along with the business strategy he had helped craft. Melissa, who now managed our employee development programs, taking notes for implementation ideas, and Connor, whose journey from skeptic to essential partner in Meridian's transformation mirrored the company's own evolution. As Director of Innovation Partnerships, he now led the very initiative I was announcing, a role that perfectly married his deep manufacturing knowledge with his newly discovered talent for collaborative problem-solving. The summit represented a milestone I hadn't anticipated in my original vindication fantasy, Meridian transitioning from subject of transformation to catalyst for wider change. What began as a personal mission to prove my worth had evolved into a movement reshaping regional manufacturing, with Meridian as its flagship example. After the presentation, the networking reception buzzed with energy as manufacturers from across the Midwest engaged with Meridian team members, exploring potential collaborations. I circulated through the crowd, catching fragments of technical discussions about specialized alloys, conversations about workforce development strategies, and excited exchanges about new market opportunities. "Ms. Mitchell?" a voice called from behind me. I turned to find Richard Gaines, Meridian's former CEO, the man whose signature had graced all 3 of my rejection letters years ago. "Mr. Gaines," I replied, maintaining professional composure despite the unexpected encounter. "I didn't realize you were attending." "I requested a quiet invitation," he explained. "I've been following Meridian's transformation from afar. It's remarkable what you've accomplished." The acknowledgement from the man who had dismissed my potential felt surreal. But strangely, it lacked the satisfaction I might once have anticipated. His validation no longer held significance compared to the tangible impact of our work. "The team deserves the credit," I said diplomatically. "Everyone embraced the vision and made it reality." He nodded, then hesitated before asking, "May I speak candidly?" "Of course. I was wrong about you," he said, his voice lower. "When you applied to Meridian those times, each time, actually, I saw someone who wouldn't fit our culture, someone who would challenge established ways, who wouldn't know their place in the hierarchy." I maintained neutral expression, waiting for him to continue. What I failed to recognize, he admitted, was that those very qualities were exactly what Meridian needed. The established ways were failing. The hierarchy was calcified. We needed someone who saw beyond what was to what could be. The irony wasn't lost on me, being rejected for the very qualities that ultimately saved the company, but instead of dwelling on past vindication, I found myself considering the broader pattern his admission revealed. The qualities that make someone disruptive in a stable environment are often essential during necessary change, I observed. The challenge is recognizing when stability has become stagnation. He nodded thoughtfully. A wisdom I acquired too late in my career, unfortunately. Glancing around at the vibrant event, he added, but perhaps not too late for the industry as a whole, thanks to initiatives like this. As he moved on to speak with other attendees, Lauren appeared at my side. Was that Richard Gaines? She asked, recognizing him from the acquisition negotiations. What did he want? To acknowledge he was wrong, I said simply. She raised an eyebrow. Satisfying? I considered the question. Less than I would have expected. It feels disconnected from the present, like hearing from a distant past. Lauren studied me with the perceptive gaze that had made her a successful venture capitalist. You've moved beyond the revenge narrative. It's not about proving him wrong anymore. It's about proving something right instead, I agreed. This vision of what manufacturing can become. The summit continued for 2 more days, with specialized sessions on everything from advanced materials to workforce development strategies. The highlight came on the final day, when we announced the Meridian Technical Scholarship Program, a partnership with the local community college to create accelerated training paths for the specialized manufacturing skills our industry increasingly required. This addresses both our talent pipeline needs and the community's economic future, I explained during the announcement. When we increase access to these high-skill careers, everyone benefits. Companies gain qualified workers, individuals access higher-paying jobs, and communities retain their economic base. The first 20 scholarship recipients were introduced, including several children of current Meridian employees. Among them was my cousin Adam's daughter, Zoe, a bright 19-year-old who had previously assumed her only option was to leave Lakefield for opportunity elsewhere. Now I can build a career here, she told the local reporter covering the event. In the same town where my family has worked for generations, but doing something cutting-edge that actually excites me. Her words captured exactly what we were building, not just a transformed company, but a transformed relationship between the company and the community, between tradition and innovation, between staying and advancing. As the summit concluded, Blackridge Partners hosted a private dinner for key Meridian executives and investors. Lauren raised a toast to the company's remarkable turnaround, citing metrics that exceeded even their optimistic projections. But the most significant moment came afterward, when she pulled me aside for a private conversation. The partners have been discussing Meridian's next phase, she began. We typically exit investments at this stage in the turnaround cycle, sell to a strategic buyer, merge with a complementary enterprise, or occasionally take a company public. Though I'd always known this moment would come, Blackridge was an investment firm, not a permanent owner. The prospect of Meridian changing hands again sent an unexpected pang through me. What's the timeline? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. That's what's unusual, Lauren replied. Given Meridian's extraordinary performance and continued growth potential, we're considering an alternative approach, a management-led acquisition. I stared at her, processing the implications. You're suggesting I buy Blackridge's stake? You and your leadership team, yes. We'd structure favorable terms, retaining a small position but transferring controlling interest. You've more than proven your ability to grow this company's value. The opportunity was stunning. A chance for Meridian to become truly independent, led by the very people who had transformed it. I'd need to discuss this with the team, I said. mind already racing through financing options and governance structures. Of course. We're in no rush. The company's performance affords us patience. She smiled. Though I suspect I know what your answer will be. You've built something remarkable here, Tessa. Something that's become far more than an investment vehicle. Later that night, I called an impromptu meeting of our core leadership team at my parents' house, the same dining room table where I had first announced my purchase of Meridian 3 years earlier. Jake, Connor, Melissa, and 4 other key executives gathered as I outlined Blackridge's proposal. A management acquisition would give us complete control over Meridian's future, I explained. No external owners, no quarterly pressure from investors prioritizing short-term returns over long-term vision. It's also significant financial risk, Martin cautioned. We'd be leveraging ourselves substantially. True, I acknowledged. But we'd be betting on what we've already proven we can do. Continue Meridian's growth trajectory and expansion into new precision markets. The discussion continued late into the night, examining every angle of the opportunity. My parents, though not part of the decision, listened from the periphery, my father occasionally asking surprisingly insightful questions about financing structures, my mother keeping coffee flowing and watching with visible pride as her children debated the future of a company that had once defined our limitations. By midnight, consensus had emerged. We would pursue the management acquisition, structuring an employee ownership component that would allow all Meridian workers to hold equity stakes proportional to their tenure and contributions. It's fitting, Jake observed, as the meeting concluded. The company that once rejected us all becoming owned by the people who transform it daily. The following week brought a different kind of milestone, the groundbreaking ceremony for Meridian's Precision Innovation Center, a 50,000-square-foot research and development facility that would serve both our internal product development and as a resource for regional manufacturing partners. The location held special significance, the former site of Lakefield Steel, a foundry that had closed 20 years earlier, leaving an industrial brownfield that had blighted the town center. For a generation, Meridian's purchase and remediation of the site represented not just business expansion, but community revitalization. As local officials and community members gathered for the ceremony, I found myself standing beside my father, surveying the construction site. "Did you ever imagine this?" he asked quietly, gesturing toward the architectural renderings displayed on easels. A sleek, modern facility with solar arrays and collaborative workspaces that bore no resemblance to the grimy factories of Lakefield's past. "Not exactly this," I admitted, "but I always believed Meridian could be more than what it was." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "I limited you with my expectations, told you to accept your place instead of creating a better one." "You were trying to protect me from disappointment," I acknowledged, understanding his perspective more clearly now than I had during my rebellious youth. "From the rejection you'd experienced." "Maybe," he conceded. "Or maybe I was just afraid of change. Afraid to imagine something different than what I'd known." A comfortable silence fell between us as we watched Connor directing the ceremonial placement of the cornerstone, his confident leadership a stark contrast to the resentful resistance he had initially shown to my vision. "You didn't just prove us wrong about you," my father said finally. "You proved us wrong about ourselves, about what was possible for all of us." His words captured the most meaningful aspect of Meridian's transformation. The company that had once rejected me, that had confined my family to prescribed roles and limited horizons, had become the vehicle through which everyone could reimagine their potential. The groundbreaking ceremony transitioned to a community celebration with food, trucks, and local bands creating a festival atmosphere. I circulated through the crowd, greeting employees and their families, community members, and local business owners who had become part of Meridian's expanded ecosystem. Near the main tent, I spotted Sarah Daniels, the quality control specialist, who had thanked me for the parental leave policy years earlier. now holding her toddler while her wife chased their preschooler through the crowd. "Ms. Mitchell," she called, waving me over. "I'd like you to meet James." She bounced the curly-haired boy on her hip. "We wouldn't be a family of 4 if not for Meridian's adoption assistance program." Such encounters occurred throughout the afternoon, employees sharing how specific changes had impacted their lives, from the educational assistance program that had helped them complete degrees, to the flexible scheduling that accommodated family needs, to the advanced training that had opened career paths previously unimaginable. These personal transformations, multiplied across hundreds of families, represented Meridian's true achievement, not just business metrics, but human flourishing. As evening approached, I found a quiet moment alone, stepping away from the celebration to the edge of the construction site. The sun was setting over Lakefield, casting a golden glow across the town that had once seemed to limit my horizons, but now served as the foundation for something extraordinary. I thought about the journey, from the rejected job applicant with a chip on her shoulder to the leader of a manufacturing renaissance, from seeking personal vindication to creating collective opportunity. The company that had told me I'd never amount to anything had become the vessel through which countless people, including my own family, were amounting to far more than they had imagined possible. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Financial. Team needs you for the management acquisition call in 10 minutes. The future beckoned, not a future of proving critics wrong, but of proving a vision right. Not a future defined by past rejections, but by ongoing creation. Not a future of individual triumph, but of shared transformation." I took one last look at the setting sun, then turned toward the celebration, toward my team, toward the next chapter in a story that had evolved far beyond its beginning. Sometimes, the most powerful response to being told you'll never amount to anything isn't buying the company that rejected you. It's transforming that company into something that helps everyone, including those who once doubted you, discover just how much they can become. And in that transformation, finding that your own definition of success has evolved from proving worth to creating value, from seeking validation to offering opportunity, from overcoming the past to building the future. The journey that began with rejection had led to something far more meaningful than vindication. It had led to vision, to purpose, to legacy. A legacy not just of personal achievement, but of collective possibility. As I rejoined the celebration, greeting employees who had become collaborators, family members who had become partners, and community members who had become stakeholders in our shared future, I recognized the ultimate irony. The company that had once defined what I couldn't be had become the means through which we all discovered what we could become. The rejection that had once fueled my ambition had been transformed into the foundation for a different kind of success, one measured not by personal vindication but by shared prosperity, not by proving critics wrong but by proving a better way forward, not by rising above limitations but by eliminating them for everyone. In the eye, I hadn't just bought the company that rejected my family, I had reimagined what that company, and all of us connected to it, could be. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.